What's up guys, Ross here from Gamertag and welcome to a very long overdue episode 3 of GT Talks. Now today we're going to be chatting something a little bit different. Instead of the usual game chat, we're actually going to be talking about some hardware, in this case fight sticks. Now what I wanted to have the conversation about with you guys is fighting fans on console are typically used to using gamepads, but what about if you're considering jumping across to a fight stick? Now this is an avenue of kind of peripherals from third-party manufacturers that can actually be quite intimidating and also quite expensive. Some of them range from £200 right up to £300. But I'm not that particularly good at fighting games, but I do love them very much, and especially with Injustice 2 coming out just last week, and Tekken 7 coming out next week, and Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite coming out in just a few months' time. It is a big year for fighting games. But I really wanted to try my hand at transferring over from a gamepad to a fight stick. But again, I wasn't really sure where to start, and also if it was for me. So what I decided to do was buy a couple of the kind of the budget entry-level fight sticks. So what we have in the blue corner is the Hori Fight Stick Mini, and in the red corner we have the Mad Catz Alpha Fight Stick. Two very different, but also aimed at pretty much the same market. It's that kind of beginner, just getting into fight stick kind of market where you're not really ready to modify them just yet. You're not really sure if fight sticks are for you, and you just want to try them out, essentially. So first things first, let's talk a little bit about price. Now these guys are actually extremely reasonable as kind of entry-level fight sticks. So the Hori, we'll start off with that one. That is coming in at about £40. Extremely reasonable, and it is a really robust little fight stick, whereas the Mad Catz Alpha Fight Stick is a little bit more expensive, and that's coming in at about £60. Now you can find them online a little bit cheaper. You can actually get this one for about the kind of 50 mark at the moment if you can chase it down in a sale or two. And the Mad Catz, sorry, the Hori Fight Stick is actually coming in just under the £40, around the kind of 35 mark. So not bad at all, especially if you find out that fight sticks aren't for you. You're not dropping a ton of money on a potential mistake there. So let's talk a little bit about the features of each. So we'll start with the Mad Catz Fight Stick. Now what I like about this one, it is actually physically quite big as well. So obviously not nearly as big as the big boy sticks, tournament edition sticks, but I've got to say, in terms of comfort and the roominess of the way your hand positions are, it's actually, I really quite like it a lot. Whereas the Hori Fight Stick, unfortunately, this is actually quite cramped for me. And I've got big hands, so if you're kind of an adult with bigger hands, then you may struggle a little bit with the actual kind of hand button coordination and the positioning on that one. Now, what is also interesting to bear in mind as well is the Mad Catz actually has a 6-button configuration on the face buttons, whereas the Hori actually has the full 8 buttons, which is very interesting considering how much smaller and much more compact the Hori Fight Stick actually is. I mean, you can see side by side here, the Hori is substantially smaller than the Mad Catz Fight Stick. But I guess the trade-off on the Hori is, unfortunately, the buttons are actually really small and actually quite tightly bunched together, whereas the Mad Catz actually has full size, I believe 30mm buttons, where they're a bit more spaced out, and the spacing is much more akin to the full size tournament edition fight sticks. Now, that is going to make a big difference. So if you're in the heat of the battle, you can imagine kind of getting your button combinations down, you're flicking the buttons, you're in the zone, and then because of the tight spacing between the Hori buttons, you accidentally mispress, or you get a little bit ham-fisted and you press the wrong button and you muck up your killer combo or your fatality if you're playing Mortal Kombat X. Whereas the trump card in the Fight Stick Alpha, and because the button spacing is much larger, much further apart, and obviously the buttons are bigger as well, you are basically not going to have any issue with feeling your way around. You're not going to have to take your eyes off the screen to feel your way around the face buttons here. So that is something to bear in mind. But saying that, what I do like about the Hori Fight Stick is just how responsive and short travel the actual the actual face buttons have in them. They're actually really responsive. You can flick the thumbstick, you can hammer away the keys, get your combinations down, and before you know it, I'm sure you'll be well, maybe taking the pros to task. You never know. You never know. There's nothing to say that you can't fight with extremely well with one of these little guys as opposed to shelling out for one of the bigger sticks. It's not necessarily going to make you a better player, right? Now, other features which I really like about the Mad Catz Fight Stick Alpha is there is a lock button at the very top here. Now, this is really, really important purely because how often when we've been playing a game where we're in the zone and we accidentally flip the start button or the pause menu by mistake, and it takes you out of the game, it pauses the match, and then your opponent's going to get a little bit annoyed at you if you do it quite frequently. But also, because the Fight Stick Alpha is actually a 6-button configuration, unfortunately the L1 and L2 are actually at the top next to the start button. A crazy decision. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they couldn't have just put an extra little bit of size on the edge there to squeeze in the full 8 buttons on the face. But hey, I don't know. So L1 and L2 is actually at the very top next to the start and the share buttons for PlayStation. Now, unfortunately, this means that if you're playing a game like Injustice or Mortal Kombat where your ultimate moves are assigned to typically the triggers on a gamepad, unfortunately, you're going to have to do a weird kind of hand configuration to hit the button at the top, almost in the dashboard, and R for L2, and then R2 on the bottom row as well. So it's kind of awkward at first. I have been using this quite extensively over the past few weeks, so I have gotten used to it. So basically, you're kind of getting your combinations down, and then you slide your hand across to feel the buttons to hit those trigger buttons at both the same times. Now, it's not a big deal, but it is something to bear in mind that it's not as easy as the Hori, where the Hori having the full 8 button on the faces, your R2 and your L2 are on the bottom row together. So it's super easy to just kind of flick those together. Whereas that can be a little bit awkward and a little bit of getting used to on the Fight Stick Alpha. Bit of an odd decision, but there you go. But as I was saying before I got into that kind of tangent there is a lock button which is basically going to make all the top row buttons, with the exception of L1 and L2, it's going to basically disable their functionality. So if you accidentally flick the guide button or if you accidentally flick the start button, it's not going to do anything. It's going to keep you in the game and keep you fighting. So that is a really, really nice little feature there. Whereas unfortunately the Hori Fight Stick Mini is a very stripped back approach to its presentation, whereas the Mad Catz has some really nice clicking, kind of chunky plastic buttons to it. The Hori has these really kind of nasty rubber buttons, which is okay. I mean, they're purely functional, but they're not terribly satisfying. I mean, even the PlayStation button on the Hori is a little rubber kind of nipple, whereas the Fight Stick Alpha has a nice kind of rounder plastic button, which is just a bit more satisfying when you're pressing the keys. And of course, there is no lock function on the Hori. Not that you necessarily need that, because this has all 8 face buttons present and correct, whereas you probably do need that feature because of the 6-button configuration. And it's kind of odd because it seems like Mad Catz have created a solution with the lock button around the problem of only having 6 buttons, where had they put 8 buttons on the front of the Mad Catz, then they wouldn't have needed a solution to lock the keys. Anyway, there you go. Just a lot of insight for you. Now, what else? In terms of the plasticking that these guys are made from, they're both extremely tough. I mean, there is no flexing or anything. They are almost like Tonka trucks. Almost, I'm not going to say indestructible, because I'm sure you probably could destroy them if you rage quitted quite spectacularly, but they are incredibly tough. And I've got to say, I have had my own rage quit moments when I'm playing some Mortal Kombat or Injustice, where I've actually slammed my fist down right across the top of these buttons repeatedly because I was just so angry. I was so close to winning, but I just got pipped at the post, and it was, well, quite infuriating to say the least. But you know, there's no cracking, there's no damage at all. It's completely good as new. Buttons still have plenty of rebound on them. There's no sticking or anything like that. There's no damage to them at all. So basically, the thing to bear in mind that both of these guys can put up with an absolute ton of abuse and still keep on trucking. They're really, really good. So bear that in mind. I mean, in terms of value for money, they're actually really, really strong in that regard. Now, they're pretty much evenly matched apart from the pricing. As I said at the beginning, one's $40, one's $60. So the Hori is about a third cheaper or thereabouts. Something else to bear in mind is a big part of your your fight scene, your tournaments and things like that, and going on to meets, is modding of your controllers, your fight sticks. Now, unfortunately, these things are not geared toward that kind of market at all. This is basically just the purely budget entry market. Unless you had extensive electrical knowledge, you probably could mod them. You could unscrew the casing and then do some, snipping of wiring, bit of soldering, and before you know it, you could replace the buttons and the sticks with probably the proper Sanwa parts or even the Hayabusa parts, which are quite popular as well. But basically, they don't make it easy. That's not what these ones are for at all. These are just for getting a feel. If you're not sure if fight sticks are for you, then check out one of these. I am loving the Fight Stick Alpha, basically because it's a bit more spacious for your hand and button positioning. And again, it is that bigger size, which is nice to kind of sit on your lap, nice to sit on a desk, and it just feels a little bit more kind of spaced out. Now, one thing that is quite important about that extra spacing, and of course the button sizing being tiny on the Hori versus the full size 30mm buttons of the Fight Stick Alpha, is if you find that you really like using a fight stick versus a gamepad, now you want to obviously make the transition of going from a little stick to one of the big boy sticks. Now, unfortunately, you're possibly going to struggle quite a bit with using one of these guys because the button spacing is really, really tight and you're quite kind of cramped in. And going to one of these guys to a big boy, then you're maybe going to find that a little bit jarring. It's not as natural a progression. Whereas the Fight Stick Alpha, because the button spacing and the fight stick itself is actually much closer in terms of proportions to the little guy to one of the big sticks, tournament edition sticks. The only real difference is actually the body itself. The body's bigger, but the actual stick and button position is very, very similar. So bear that in mind. If you're thinking about making the transition from one of these little guys into a bigger stick, it's probably going to be a much more natural progression, much more familiar hand positioning going from one of these guys into a bigger stick. So that is something to bear in mind as well. But guys, overall, I am really quite impressed with both of these sticks. Obviously, you can no doubt tell that I favour the Mad Catz Alpha. I just like it. It's a bit bigger, and it has these chamfered edges where you can actually rest the heel of your hand and just click away the buttons. The pinky, index fingers, thumb, all really, really kind of natural, and it feels really good. And yeah, really, really, really impressed. Not too expensive either, depending on which one you go for. Even the Mad Catz at around between £50 and £60 is nothing really to balk at. You can buy a set of headphones for way more than that. You can buy a DualShock 4 controller or any other controller for more than that, or roughly the same price, depending on where you shop around. Yeah, really quite satisfied with both of them. But I'm going to stick with the Fight Stick Alpha and keep this one for when I have the guys around for a bit of split screen competitiveness. And they both put up with a ton of abuse, which is obviously great to know as well. So guys, let us know in the comments your feedback if you have been using either of the thumbsticks. If you have any questions, then we'll do our best to answer them and reply in the comments. If you have enjoyed this video, then do remember to give us a like and a thumbs up, and share it as well. Let's get chatting about the transition of going from a gamepad to a fight stick, and let us know what you think. But guys, I'm going to sign off on there. Thanks for watching and take care. Bye-bye.